You are lying in bed. The conversation ended 3 hours ago, but your mind is still in it, finding the moment everything shifted and what you should have said. This is not overthinking. This is something inside you that was built to watch. Some children grew up in houses where the air could change without warning, where a parent's footsteps down the hallway told you everything about the next hour, where reading the space around you was not a skill, it was the only thing that kept things quiet. Those children became extraordinary at paying attention, and that attention did not stay in that house. It followed them here, into this bed, into this hour. Call it what it was, not a thinking problem, a watching problem. And that part of you still doing it right now is not broken. It is on duty, scanning for something that stopped arriving a long time ago. And here's what that looks like in an actual life, not in theory. In yours, you send a message and then read it back immediately, checking if it sounded wrong. You walk into a place, and before you have said a word, you have already read every face in it. Someone takes a second too long to reply, and something in your chest shifts before you even form a thought. You rehearse conversations before they happen, not from weakness, simply because you learned early that the wrong word at the wrong moment could change the entire temperature of a home. Imagine a child sitting very still at a dinner table, not eating, just noticing, trying to read which version of the evening was arriving. That child is still there, scanning, doing what kept things quiet when quiet was the only safe place to be. And what nobody ever names about all of this, you are not someone who thinks too much. You are someone whose inner world learned to find what was coming before it arrived, and it got very good at that job. So good that it kept going long after the house that required it was behind you. And the one coming next, this is the behavior most people never connect back to any of this. Stay with this. What was actually happening had nothing to do with thinking at all. That part of you that cannot stop running was never running from nothing. It was running from a version of the world it learned before it had words to describe it. A world where stillness was not always comfortable, where silence had to be read carefully, where a child understood that paying close attention was the only way to stay one step ahead of what was coming. Psychologists have a name for what that child became. But the name matters less than what it felt like from the inside. From the inside, it felt like being the only person in the place who was truly paying attention, like everyone else was simply living, and you were managing. Imagine someone standing at a window in a dark house, not because they want to, but because they learned that knowing what was outside was always better than being surprised by it. That is what something inside you was doing. And here is what nobody ever told it. The house changed. The window is different now. But that part of you never got that message. And so it kept going. Not because you were stuck, because it never received the news that it was finally safe to rest. The part that surprises most people is that this has a shape you can measure. Dr. Martin Teicher, a researcher at Harvard University who spent years studying how early environments shape the developing brain, found that children who grew up in homes where emotional safety was unpredictable show measurable differences in how their brains process alertness, even decades later. The brain that was never sure what was coming next learned to keep a low hum of readiness running at all times, like a car engine left on overnight, not because the driver needs to go somewhere, but because somewhere along the way switching it off stopped feeling safe. Imagine someone sitting in a quiet space, no noise, no tension, nothing wrong, and unable to fully settle, waiting, listening for something they cannot name. That is not a thinking problem. That is a body doing exactly what it was trained to do. In the part that matters most, it was trained by something that happened long before you had any say in it. The part of you that has been exhausting you was never the enemy. The one that goes back over conversations, prepares for every outcome, and reads every place before entering it, was not a mistake. It was a solution. A child who could not predict what was coming next built the most careful early warning system a small person could build, noticing everything, missing nothing, becoming so good at reading what was in a space that nobody around them ever noticed how hard they were working. That was not a flaw. That was extraordinary. Imagine a child standing at the edge of a room full of adults, not playing, not laughing, just paying attention, learning what each expression meant, filing it away for later. That child was not broken. They were preparing for a world that kept asking more of them than it should have, and what they built carried them here to a life where they are still standing. What they needed then was someone to say, "You do not have to watch quite so hard anymore." Not everyone heard that. And if any part of this has been sitting heavy, talking to someone you trust or a professional can make more difference than you might expect, simply because you have been working very hard for a very long time. You did not choose to think this way. You were not born worrying. You learned this in a house where paying attention was the only thing that made the next moment manageable. And the part of you that learned it was not weak. It was reading a world that required it. But here's the quietest truth in all of this. That world is not the one you are living in now. The air in this place does not shift the way it used to. The silences here do not carry the same weight they once did. And that part of you that is still scanning can be told something it has never fully heard, gently, without force, that the door it has been guarding for all these years is no longer the one that needs guarding. Imagine someone finally sitting down in a space they have been standing in for years, not because anything changed, because they finally understood they were allowed to rest in it. That is what this looks like, slow and quiet. Something inside gradually learning that the world it is preparing for is not the world it is actually in. And if any part of you recognized itself in any of this, go back to the very first line, the one about the bed, the conversation, the replaying. You will hear it differently now, not as a flaw you were born with, but as the sound of something that learned to protect you before you even knew you needed protecting.